this for the
It's a
money
good time to
printing.
mention that I am actually launching my new coin called Lex Coin.
You mean shitcoin? Yes.
Oh, God. I'm going to have to block you with love. Okay. One thing I wanted to ask you about is the Fed's, this paper they released in January 20th on the potential central bank digital currency, CBDC. What are your thoughts about that? Is it just another, is there pros and cons to this? Is it at all interesting to you that they're even considering this kind of thing?
I used to think that it's just basically waffle. It's meaningless because as it exists, the dollar is a central bank digital currency.
Right.
The vast majority of dollars are digital. And but I think the way that over the last couple of years I've changed my mind on this. I think this is there's some serious substance behind these ideas. And what they mean effectively is the disintermediation of the banking system and giving everybody an account at the Federal Reserve. This is kind of the really dangerous idea, and I think this is enormously significant. Effectively, as somebody who's lived in the Soviet Union, what this is the return of the Ghost Bank on a global scale with modern technology. So under the Soviet Union, there was something called the Ghost Bank or the People's Bank, and that was the only bank in the country. And you had an account with the national bank, and if you said something wrong, your money got terminated from the Ghost Bank. Now imagine that combined with the power of digital technology, and you can see that this could be an enormously powerful technology, really, because if banks are out of the picture, then we change the fundamental reality of fiat as being the creation of money through lending, and then it becomes the creation of money truly by fiat, by government fiat. So we move to a system in which money is just basically, it's like we have money that is pieces of paper, and every time we've had fiat money that was just pieces of paper, it collapsed very quickly. With the current system, money is credit, and the creation of credit is restricted to some point, and the creation of credit is self-correcting. I discussed this in the fiat standard. If the central bank allows banks to create too much credit, that creates a bubble, and then there's a collapse in the money supply, which prevents hyperinflation from happening because the money creation is self-destructive. It's self-correcting. So you end up with an average of 7% per year increase because you have 10% for 5 years, and then you get negative 20% for 1 year, and it's correcting. But now if you get rid of the credit creation mechanism and it's just assigning money directly, we're likely going to get much faster inflation. And I think that's obviously a huge problem, and perhaps the even bigger problem is the enormous amount of power that it gives to governments. It allows them to create an awful dystopia where you've got your money on your phone, and anything you do is completely supervised and controlled through your spending. So they want to introduce a new lockdown, then they'll just make your money not work. Your money's broken today. You can't spend money, or you can only spend money in your local supermarket for the next 3 months because you can't leave your neighborhood. Your money stops working outside of your neighborhood. This Chinese social credit score system is an example of this. And I think, I don't know, I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know what the likelihood is of implementing something like this in the US. I've discussed it with Michael Saylor. He thinks it's highly unlikely. He thinks, the people who've been pushing this are very far from the position of power, and the traditional monetary and financial system is going to survive intact. I certainly hope so. I think this would be a terrible thing if it comes to pass. But I don't think many people think that it is something that would undermine Bitcoin. A lot of common objection to Bitcoin is, well, governments are just going to launch their own digital currencies and then Bitcoin is going to die. And I think this is completely missing the point. People think Bitcoin is important because it's digital. It's not. National currencies can be digital. Bitcoin is important because it's not inflationary and because nobody controls it. Central bank digital currencies are likely to be very inflationary, and they're likely to have very strong control at the top. So if anything, they are an advertisement for Bitcoin rather than a replacement for it.
If it's Bitcoin, if it's gold, it's a way for multiple nations to partake. So if you were to imagine a future where we move from the fiat standard back to the gold standard and then to the Bitcoin standard, or skipping that, going directly to the Bitcoin standard, what would it take? Is it gradual? Is it immediate? What are possible trajectories that take us? Well, basically, where the final sort of empirical observation is that you overtake Bitcoin, overtakes first gold and then bonds in terms of its monetary power in the world. But like just specifically from a government perspective, how do we move the United States, China, Russia, India, European Union to Bitcoin standard?
I'm not entirely concerned about whether governments move or not. In fact, I'd be very happy for them not to move as long as possible, so that individuals can accumulate more and more Bitcoin while it's still cheap.
So the people will move and the governments will catch up.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of what I allude to. I mean, the point of the fiat standard is really a Bitcoin book. It talks about fiat most of the time, but it's does so to analyze Bitcoin and the rise of Bitcoin. In the final chapter, I discuss how I think this relationship plays out. The way that I tend to think of it is that most likely what's going to happen is we're going to have kind of financial apartheid, where there's going to be two monetary systems. One is government controlled, and it comes with increasing amounts of surveillance and inflation. And then if you want, you can just opt out of that and get into Bitcoin. And it's likely going to be difficult for governments to stop people from getting into Bitcoin for all of the technical reasons that make it very hard to stop Bitcoin. So then we have this alternative that is Bitcoin, which is not inflationary and does not have a central authority that can censor it. I think gradually is my hope, and I also think my most likely scenario, but maybe I am biased because everybody thinks what they want is what's going to happen. I think we're just going to witness, the same relationship, because governments make their currencies so that they can devalue them. And Bitcoin thrives on that. And more people are going to learn, more and more people are going to find out. And whether it's through curiosity or self-interest or through the destruction of their national currency, all roads lead to Bitcoin. So more and more people are going to buy Bitcoin. The price of Bitcoin is going to go up. And as it goes up, Bitcoin becomes a more significant part of the world economy. And then this is something that the skeptics don't get. Like a lot of the academic skeptics to Bitcoin, they offer up all of these theories about why they think Bitcoin can't work. And then they present it and they think, they've delivered the knockout blow, as if Bitcoin needs their permission or the world is going to need their permission. Well, the reality is people are going to join Bitcoin out of greed, out of self-interest. Number go up technology is really what's going to get everybody in.
Yeah.
And that's really the Trojan horse for fixing the world. Come for the greed and stay for the revolution. It's gonna keep going up because people don't like to be poor, except for most economists and academics. People don't like to be poor. People don't enjoy getting their wealth destroyed. And they care more about their self-interest than they care about economic theories about whether this works as money or not. They see their cousin escaped hyperinflation and managed to get a bigger house because they bought Bitcoin 5 years ago. They realized maybe I should stop mocking my cousin and start buying more Bitcoin. And this is, I think, an indomitable force that's going to continue. And one thing, most Bitcoiners tend to lean toward an apocalyptic transition. The fiat's going to collapse, we're going to get hyperinflation, everything's going to be terrible, and then we're going to move to Bitcoin. And I present the case for why I think maybe that might not be the case. Maybe we won't get this kind of apocalyptic scenario. And it's because, and this was like the conclusion of the fiat standard, which is once you realize that mining fiat is creating debt, and Bitcoin is allowing, so in order to have fiat money, we need to have people borrow. We need to have people make loans. And the problem that fiat money runs into today is that if you want to save money, if you want to hold savings, you have a problem. Where do you put your savings? So you put your savings in debt, in the creation of more bonds. Wherever you take your savings, you create a bubble in those things. And this is why we see a bubble in the stock market, a bubble in the bond market, a bubble in housing. It's because people are looking for savings, looking for a place where they can save. All of those things are crappy saving instruments because they're like copper in that there's nothing to stop the people behind them to make more of them. House builders can build more houses. Governments can issue more bonds. The crappy, fraudulent companies can list on the stock market and make more stocks. Well, Bitcoin finally offers us an outlet. We don't need to keep creating more debt. We can invest in this asset that is hard and that is internationally liquid, and that nobody can make more of. So there is no bubble in it. There is no mechanism for somebody to increase the supply and bring the price crashing down, like with copper and real estate and bonds. So Bitcoin is the way out. And this is why I think there's a good case to be made for why the fiat authorities might embrace Bitcoin, because they'll see it is their way out of this enormous debt bubble that everybody is stuck in. Particularly the richest and most powerful people in the world and the richest and most powerful governments in the world are the world's biggest borrowers. They're the ones in a lot of debt. So a continuous slow devaluation of the value of that debt as people upgrade and move on to a hard asset that continues to appreciate is the way that is the peaceful way that we wind down the fiat Ponzi, I think.
You can see it being like a political part of a political platform for future people that run for president, those kinds of things to address. Obviously, it's not just for the powerful and the rich. The people are bothered by the debt. The people are bothered by everything that you describe with fiat. And if you want to sell yourself in a democracy as a good leader, you might want to make that part of the platform. You mentioned Michael Malice. He just texted me asking me to ask you, what do you like best about Michael Malice? If you can spend 5 to 10 to 20 to an hour talking about the genius of Michael Malice, what do you like?
Where does one even start? Well, obviously the haircut first.
Yeah, he just gets sexier with age. That's for sure. That's fun. Do you, his ideas, his trolling and humor, have you gotten a chance to interact with him?
Yes, I've met Michael maybe 10, 12 years ago in New York. I used to live in New York when he used to live in New York. Met him a couple of times. There was a bunch of anarchists in New York used to throw a happy hour once a month. It was called the High Time Preference Hoppe Hour in honor of Hans Hermann Hoppe. So I met him there a couple of times, and we followed each other on Twitter for a while.
Is there interesting that you're aware of philosophical differences in your worldviews?
No, I think we pretty much see eye to eye. I think the difference is mainly that he spends a lot of time focusing on American politics and American pop culture, which I don't pay much attention to, I guess.
So you look more at the monetary system, the economics of it all, and just the history, and just looking at it, zooming out at the big picture of it all. Although recently he's working on a book called The White Pill, and he's been every time I see him, I mean, he's in some dark aspect of the 20th century. He's just like, I just finished writing about Holodomor. As you might imagine, he's not taking much, I believe, of a monetary perspective on things. His book, his writing, at least for time, his kind of philosophical ideology perspective that's outside of the monetary system. But you argue that those are actually inextricably linked. But
and I don't think he would disagree. But,
he would. But a book has to be, can only be so long, I suppose.
It can only focus on so many things.
If you can put on your wise sage hat and give some advice to young people, I mean, the past 4 hours have been a kind of advice, but if you can focus, and if somebody in high school or college is thinking about what to do with their career, can have a successful career or to have a life they can be proud of, what would you tell them?
I'd say probably the most important advice that I would give is to find a way to give value to other people. And this is really the key thing. You need to wake up every morning and figure out how to serve others. This is the key to everything you want in life. Everything that you want is on the other side of you serving others. So figure out how you can serve others in a good way, how you can do it in a way that they value, and you've got an incredible mechanism for figuring that out, which is the market. Go out there and do things for other people, and
the market will tell you.
The market will tell you exactly. If you're young, you have the enormous advantage of being able to make mistakes essentially and learn from them. So go out there, do things of value for others, figuring out how you can do something that what is it that you can do that contributes the most value to other people's lives. And increasingly, I think with the modern technology, this is increasingly becoming online, and it's I think you should consider how you can create value online, because that scales beyond anything that you can do in the physical world in a very, very well, maybe not beyond. Obviously, there are profitable businesses in the physical world, but I think online is enormous potential. And coding, I think, is enormously powerful. I'm not a coder myself, but I strongly recommend people get into learning how to code. And I think it's probably the thing that carries the most power. So initially, we were working with our hands. We started working with machines. Machines are much more productive. Well, code is an even higher level of productivity, where you basically program the machines to produce things. So, few clicks of a keyboard, and you can move millions of machines around the world in certain ways. So it carries an enormous amount of value. I think I always tell all young people to learn to code. It's the best thing. I used to tell it to my students when I was at university. I tell them to drop out and go learn to code. It's probably a better use of their time and money.
We could probably do both.
Yeah.
University has an interesting function. I mean, probably you and I have different perspective on this. Probably has to do with a little bit of a different journey in terms of fields, because I've stayed engineering focused for a long time, and there's less, some of the troubles you might highlight in the education system, there's less troubles of that kind in engineering, because math hasn't changed for a long time. So it's a lot of it is just doing hard things, being forced to do hard things, and becoming a bit of a generalist, while on the side you're also becoming a specialist based on your own passion, driven by your own passion. So school, at least high school, I don't know about the university, but high school has a really nice, one of the only times in your life, at least in my life, I was forced, but now I see, given the opportunity to spend my entire day learning broadly. And that's something, I don't know, the way time works, it just runs away from you. You never really get a chance to learn quite that broadly again. That's the curse of specialization, is you kind of never get a chance to study biology, chemistry if you're a physicist. Time runs away from you. So it's enjoy the broad education of it. But yeah, like you said, find the things that valued by the market. And on the other side of it, you said all the good stuff. So that's also a way to get happiness.
Yeah. And I'd also add the horse that I like to whip all the time is the low time preference aspect of things, saving with Bitcoin. So I think my advice to young people is, when you're young, you think of the world in a very short term generally. You're focused on the present, and you think that everything that's happening in the present is the most important thing that's ever going to happen in the history of humanity. Lower your time preference, think about the future, think further down the line, think about the consequences of the things you do, and then what, so you do this now, it feels good today, but then what happens tomorrow? You go out, you drink, you enjoy yourself. Well, think about the hangover. But more in long term, think about the implication of living this kind of life. Think about every decision that you make, the long term implication of it. And part of that is Bitcoin. Part of that is save in Bitcoin. I urge everybody to put savings in Bitcoin for the long term. Don't buy Bitcoin for the short term. Don't buy Bitcoin today so that you can sell it. Don't put your savings in Bitcoin today so that you can sell it all next month and buy a house. Put money in Bitcoin that you expect to keep in Bitcoin for another 5, 10 years or so. At least 4 years is what I recommend for people. So keep a low time preference, focus on the future, and save in Bitcoin.
And learn about how to buy Bitcoin, how to learn about all this technology. Part of this is this conversation, but there's so much awesome material out there. And thank you, by the way, for this gift of a hardware wallet.
Nice.
So you should definitely invest in it yourself. And what would you call this? These are
Open dimes.
Open dimes. Yeah. So this is like USB that you can, like a hardware device that stores Bitcoin.
Yeah. So you don't have to worry about knowing the password. It contains the password within it, and it's tamper-proof. So you can save the Bitcoin on it. And
so when the apocalypse comes, you need the value to be stored on an actual thing that you can have in your physical possession.
Yeah.
That's exactly what this is.